my 8th fucking and final attempt. If this drops out, I'm out. This is Footy Rants. I'm Benny Matthews. I'm running solo. Let's just, as you can tell, I'm quite frustrated at this point. We're just going to dive straight into things. We've got the Dogs and the Raiders on tonight. So a fair bit of conjecture coming into this round around the Raiders. Not only have they fucking not won a game yet, but they're arguably their best player so far this season, Jack Whiten, has been embroiled in like some fucking nightclub scandal. So it's obviously going to blow off a little bit of steam with the boys after the game and got himself in a bit of mischief. A losing culture and alcohol are probably not the best mix. So, I don't want this to centre around off-field drama. I think the mainstream media cover off enough of that shit. So I'd much rather just talk footy. So aside from the off-field drama there, the biggest concerns for me looking at this Raiders team is that not only is Blake Austin still out of that side, but also Josh Papali has sensationally been dropped. So, you've got a guy who's played numerous games of State of Origin for Queensland as well as Australia. So obviously there's something that Ricky Stewart isn't seeing from those two individuals that others are. For me, the guys that have got to go are fucking BJ Leilua and Jordan Rapana. I mentioned it on the breakdown of round 4 last week about their on-field behaviour and just general demeanour. It's really, really poor. The fact that Rapana, blew up about a knock-on, that genuinely was a knock-on. Had he gone back and watched the video, he would find that the touch judge absolutely nailed it. It's just immaturity. It just shows that when it's a real good judge of character. You want to see people when things aren't going their way. So this is definitely a situation for that club in Canberra. They haven't got off to a start that I don't think anyone was expecting with the backline that they have. It's all too similar to Parramatta. But yeah, to keep Adahingano, who I thought had a fairly average game, and leave Blake Austin out there, perhaps there's something going on behind closed doors that we're not aware of as the general public. But, you look down to the Bulldogs lineup who, I thought last week they definitely lost the game. They had all the fundamentals there without the bloke who basically won them the game the week before in Moses Mbai, who was out with a concussion quite early on. I thought they rallied quite well with that reshuffle. And everything, for all intents and purposes, seems to be working well enough with Jeremy Marshall-King and Kieran Foran. Is it the halves combination that I would pick? No, but I think it's about the best that we can sort of assume they can play with, because I don't think Frawley and Foran is any better combination. So we run through those lineups. There's some more changes. Like going back to that Canberra Raiders lineup, having Joe Tarpanay on that edge and Elliot, I guess moving Elliot Whitehead back to that edge is a good thing, but I would much rather see Joe Tarpanay in the middle. For me, that's where he is. I think he's got a good offload to help promote that second phase play within the middle, to play out to their faster guys. I guess it is debatable seeing a bigger body in Papali playing on an edge, but I think someone like that who does move with such velocity and such power, to isolate him with a half is something that you really do want to double down with. So I think it's always a good move that he does play in the back row. Whereas Tarpanay, he's a workhorse for mine. But I'm happy to be proven wrong on that front. Looking at the Dogs lineup further, we see Aiden Tolman's out due to that ankle injury. So Adam Elliott will pack the scrum at lock, which still leaves Josh Jackson and Tyler Mariner on the edges, which I like. I think that there's some quality back rows. We're starting to see for Tyler Mariner develop into the NRL starter that we hope that he would. So for mine, pulling a few stats up for these guys. The Dogs have won 3 of the last 4 at GIO, but 7 of the last 8 games between these two clubs have been by 12 points or less. So, history shows that this is going to be, a low-scoring game, and I guess that's probably a little bit more indicative of the culture and style that the Dogs play with. They like that grindy, grimy style. And the fact that the Raiders are so desperate, I think they're going to be forced to have to try and get in that arm wrestle. They don't really have the luxury now. And if the fact that certain guys are going to be trying to play for their spots, you've got the young Liam Knight comes in for his second game of his NRL career. Ada Hingano's new to the club. Shannon Boyd dropped back to the bench, so Soliola and Paulo will start up front. Havili still, hasn't really clicked outside of the first 10-15 minutes where he scored the opening try for the Raiders season against the Titans in round 1. And again, I'm not sold at all on Aiden Caesar and Sam Williams as halves. So for me, I think the desperation and I guess poor start continues for the Raiders. But for the good of the competition, I suppose, I hope they win and get off the duck. But as it tipster goes, I think the Dogs, they'll be really, really dirty that they threw that game away last week. And we've seen that with Dean Pay in the post-match press conference. So he'll undoubtedly want to be turning that around and looking to get victory for his club and the Bulldogs faithful. I think they've been patient enough with the changes that have gone around at their club, and they're a loyal. We hear it echoed time and time again about the family nature of the club. So just got a question here from Rhino. You mentioned last week that there's a problem, an existing cultural difference between young Raiders and the old head that Ricky Stewart is. So you think they'll respond well to the criticism they receive? Mate, I honestly don't think they will. I hope as a fan, again, like you look at that 1-6, Whiten, Kotrick, Croker, Leilua, Rapana, like that gets me excited as a rugby league fan to see those guys perform well. But that cultural difference, I think it gets to a point where even if it is attempted to be addressed by Ricky Stewart, some of those guys, if they're already non-responders, it doesn't matter. Because Ricky Stewart doesn't strike me as the guy who would come to the party and apologise for anything, perhaps some sort of blow-up that he may have had with those players. And, he's come out in publicly and stated at times, Jordan Rapana needed to get that error out of his game when he was coming out of trouble and the like. So who knows? For all intents and purposes, for what we've seen them toss up 2 years ago and that great run home in that final series, sometimes these relationships of coach and player just run its course. And maybe we're seeing that now that Leilua and Rapana combination mixed with the culture of Canberra being isolated in that town down there, along with Ricky Stewart, maybe it's run its course. Maybe the change is the best thing for everyone involved because, I've been involved in some clubs with some players that have endless talent to be brought to a team, but they end up just becoming a cancer that inevitably starts to detract from the performance of those around them. So yeah, look, Rhino, for me, I don't think it gets fixed with what Stewart brought to the table last week. So yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what sort of pressure starts to mount on Ricky Stewart as a coach if they do go 5-0, and do we start to see in that mainstream media the questions of does the axe come out, and there's plenty of coaches waiting in the wings trying to get back into the NRL. You got the likes of Michael Maguire, I believe Jeff Tuvey. I'm not sure. I don't think Jeff Tuvey's coaching the Super League. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but there's plenty of quality coaches that are waiting around. Neil Henry is without a job, so yeah, plenty of guys that aren't in that top echelon that definitely have the ability to join it. That's for sure. Alrighty, so let's move on. So that's tonight's game anyway. So yeah, if you couldn't pick up on my tone, I'm tipping a Dogs victory. I just like the fact that they'll be able to get into a bit of a grind. I think Woods is starting to find his feet at the club now. He started to get that offload going, and if Clemmer and Woods are going to be serious contenders in being that dominant force leading into Origin, because no doubt Brad Fittler will be expecting those guys to form a really strong bond and push for a case to be the starting front rows for New South Wales come May. So yeah, second game Friday. Second game of round 5 is really, really interesting. It's basically going to be a tale of who can keep the momentum going and who can shift the momentum. So we've got the Cronulla Sharks versus the Sydney Roosters at Shark Park. Can't wait. The big question for me is, does Dugan and Moylan's return disrupt the flow that Cronulla developed last week to beat one of the premiership heavyweights, Melbourne Storm? Because it can't be argued that Melbourne Storm were far more serious contenders for this flag in 2018 than the Sharks were. I think people sort of expect, even with those signings of Dugan and Moylan, that they're definitely going to be a top 8 threat. And I fully support that. I think they'll definitely be in the top 8. But I don't think anyone saw them beating the Storm last week, especially without those two key signings. So that's my question, because we've seen a lot, a number of those people that have come into positions throughout the spine not actually inject the sort of form that you would come to expect. You know, we've even seen Cooper Cronk, Luke Keary, you know, they struggled massively last week. You know, we've repeated through the first 3 rounds how much Maloney struggled playing with Cleary, so it wasn't until the ships cleared the deck that he was able to take control. So yeah, it's really, really interesting. So yeah, Dugan back from the groin injury. Val Holmes is the wing. Edric Lee's back out, so he gets booted. So yeah, so your back 5 looks like this: Dugan, Fecky, Ramian holds his spot, Latelli and Val Holmes, Moylan and Townsend in the halves, Fafita, Pryor up front, Brayley at 9 as usual, and then the back row is Luke Lewis, Wade Gray and Paul Gallen, which I absolutely love. So the more footy those 3 guys are playing together, the more success than not the Cronulla club is going to have. Looking down now to the Roosters, I guess a little bit of faith shown, and probably Trent Robertson saying he's not hitting the panic button too early, so that they name an unchanged side. So the team that got embarrassed, I think, is a word that comes to mind by the Warriors, 30 points to 6. That they'll remain unchanged. Pluses, minuses in this. Look, they're both two wins, 2 losses. So they're at that critical point where they want to obviously hold that winning record. One of these clubs is going to hold a losing record after this. The Roosters have won just 4 of 15 games versus the Sharks since 2010. So they don't have a worse winning record against any other club in that time period. So over the last 8 seasons, the Roosters haven't lost to a team more than Cronulla. So, you know, that's a big tick in the box. I think you sort of take the home ground advantage with a bit of a grain of salt. They weren't really renowned for being overly strong at home last season. So it'll be interesting, though, coming off the back of a big win against Melbourne last week. But albeit, the thing that concerns me about that, yes, there's confidence. Yes, it's 2 points. Was it convincing? No. We've seen 1 try, the rest with penalty goals. So you sort of, even though the Melbourne Storm will be thoroughly disappointed, you know, they've lost to arch rivals in Cronulla. They lost to the Tigers earlier in the season. But yeah, how much confidence do you actually take as Shane Flanagan going into this game, knowing that the Roosters will be looking to bounce back as well? So I like the fact that Trent Robertson is stuck to his guns. I think it shows the maturity of him as a coach and what he, I guess, is trying to achieve long term. And he'll be looking to see a response from those players. And, you know, if there isn't a response after this, then you'll expect to see some changes being made. My head says, you know, like the Sharks, they love that tough, grindy footy. And I think at times the Roosters struggle to sort of hold that style of football. You know, we look at the back 5 there, and Tedesco, I guess Robinson isn't the name that comes to mind now that Tupou's out injured with that pec. But Latrell Mitchell, Joe Manu and Blake Ferguson definitely fit that mould at the start. You know, even though Blake Ferguson was a little bit quieter last week, still showed some good signs. And that Keary-Cronk combination is only going to get better. So it's just that consistency. And with that score line, I thought Dylan Napa was still pretty sensational. Some of the contact that he fronted up, and that's why he's still got the number 10 jersey on his back, forcing Waria Hargraves and Mitch Orbison back to the bench. So Madison holds his spot as well. And I've really been liking the development of Victor Radley's role in this Roosters lineup alongside Jake Friend. And boy, can the fucking kid whack. Can he whack? He come up with a pretty soft error during that game and absolutely put it on I can't remember. I believe it was one of the reserve forwards for the Warriors. His name escapes me at the moment, but fucking folded him like a deck chair. And as a rugby league, I guess, fan of the technical sides of the game and the more minutia, that was something that really got me out of my seat. So yeah, it's good to see that the little fellas get underneath and more importantly, I guess from a coach's perspective, take ownership of his own fuck up. So for me, I'm going to lean towards the Roosters to bounce back. I just like the way that Cooper Cronk is going to bring that steadying nature. He's a fucking winner. No doubt he'll have plenty to say after last week, and I think also he'll take a lot of responsibility. And he'll want to pick apart his game from last week and what they need to improve on. So I very much look forward to seeing how they respond. So for me, it's a Roosters victory. The Dragons up against the Bunnies. Geez, the Dragons are red hot at the moment. The biggest thing that's playing into their hands at the moment is injury free. And it shows why they're 4 from 4. Is they're the only club without injuries essentially. It is going to be interesting because injuries are going to sneak into it. We did see a big run from the Cowboys there. I think it was pretty damn close to a record, if not a record, for the longest streak of the same 17 playing week in, week out. But yeah, the loss of Sam Burgess for the Rabbitohs with that suspension, which I thought was really, really harsh. He ended up copping 2 weeks. I guess it's probably more off the back of his history of suspensions as opposed to anything else. I don't think there was any great malice in it. So I guess if we're looking for those people that are targeted more than most when it comes to judiciary hearings, Sam Burgess is definitely one of those names that comes to mind. He does find himself in the hot seat quite regularly. We've seen some more changes. Adam Reynolds is back into the side, which puts Adam Dwayhe back to the bench. Look, I don't know about that move. I think just adding another small body into an already vastly physical game is a huge gamble, especially from a rookie coach in Seabold. But I get the idea behind it. You're rewarding a kid. I thought he did a stand-up job. What I guess my biggest question is, what role does he come in as now? You're obviously left Robbie Farah out of the side for the start of the season because you're expecting Damien Cook to play the full 80 minutes. So, is there some sort of shadow around Adam Reynolds? Are we going to see, is it a ploy? Perhaps, I don't know what sort of ploy you're trying to generate when you're coming in against a team that's 4-0. So, look, Homer Hunt comes in the centres, so Gagai's on the wing. Robert Jennings was all cleared from his HIA after that head clash with Moses Mbai last week. But yeah, if I'm the Anthony Seibold, Walker and Reynolds, they've got to come together on an all new front, an all new level ASAP, and really try and rise up to the challenge. It's going to be one up front, that's for sure. So look, you'd probably expect Jason Clark, the experienced Jason Clark, to come in for the suspended Sam Burgess. Is it a name that I'm super excited about as a replacement goes? No, I think Jason Clark's well past it. You know what you're going to get, and he's as loyal as they come, and I can't knock a guy for that. But yeah, surely there's some younger talent, but perhaps that's what they're most afraid of at the moment. They just need some sort of stability and experience in their ranks. But geez, the way that the Dragons forward pack's playing up front, and like we were saying in the podcast earlier in the week, the contrasts are left to right. Nana McDonald to Jason Nightingale, Aitken to Laffey, Widdop to Hunt, like that. They're all such, it's like yin and yang. So for me, I just can't go past the Dragons based off that. I just think the Dragons will bash them up the middle. I think they'll find a way to get intimidated without their caretaker in Sam Burgess. And I really expect James Graham to try and find another level. I don't feel like he definitely hasn't played bad. That would be far too critical. And I guess it's hard to look overly good in a team that is bringing a true team performance to the front. But I really want him to stand up and, I guess, continue to fill guys. Although Paul Vaughan's experience, he doesn't have representative experience. And I'd love to see, perhaps James Graham drag Paul Vaughan along to put him in the fray for a State of Origin jersey. Continue to develop, Tarek Sims' work ethic now that he's got a starting jersey. And most importantly, ensure that Jack de Belin does wear a sky blue jersey in 2018. So, yeah, I'm really looking for James Graham to have a massive, massive game. I just don't see a way for the Rabbitohs really getting into this. They do have strike, Alex Johnson, Greg Inglis, Damien Cook. If they do get going, not to mention Cody Walker and Reynolds, they've got the attack. Angus Crichton, the list goes on. There's talent in every single of one of the 16 teams in the NRL. But a functioning team is the most important part of it. So at the moment, the Rabbitohs aren't that, and they're going to have to scrounge together the confidence they got to hang in there and get that win last week if they're any chance of upsetting this. But yeah, I'm liking the look of St. George going 5-0. Tigers and Melbourne. So we're seeing these two clubs come together again already. It's a real funny draw. We're seeing probably 6 to 8 clubs that are going to clash with each other twice within the first 5 to 6 weeks. I really don't get it. But anyway, it's a trivial matter. So the biggest changes that we're seeing is on the edge for the Storm. Will Chambers suspended for 2 weeks for the old guillotine on the Sharks captain Paul Gallen. Kenny Bromwich comes in for Finucane, who also got suspended, but he's actually broken his finger, so he sort of 2 birds, 1 stone there. They were going to miss him regardless. But yeah, I don't want to gloss over that fact of Will Chambers being gone. So young Tonamapay has been named in there. Had a wee of a game for East Tigers over Sunny Coast in the Queensland Cup. I believe he scored 3 tries, but it was all pretty much one-way traffic. He didn't really have to do too much to score those. And if you followed any of my footy rants over the last, we're approaching, I think, in another 2 weeks. I've been doing this for a year. I'm not a fan of young Tonamapay, to put that lightly. I think there are a lot of gaps in his defensive ability. So, this is his first game for 2018. It'll be interesting to see what he's learnt in the off-season. Has he continued to develop? Had a whole heap of responsibility playing fullback for Samoa in the World Cup. He's undoubtedly got potential there. Otherwise, he simply wouldn't have been able to stay on the Storm's books for this amount of time. But you double that down with Vunivalu probably being in the deepest trough of lack of form in his young career. And I don't think that's being too critical. The Storm's high standards, he's been well below that. Some of his carries out of trouble. Defensive reads have been real, trigger friendly. I think that ultimately comes off the back of young Brodie Croft coming into the team. I've spoken at length about my concerns for him at times. But if I'm the Tigers, that's exactly where I'm going. I'm looking down that left edge, and when I've got someone like Nguama there, that can draw that defender in, the fact that he's got the size, speed, and strength, I'm really trying to get Vunivalu unsettled by having Tonamapea defending inside him and really test their trust out quite early. So looking to this Tigers side, having with Teen Zalesniak on the wing, I'm really, really shocked, to be perfectly honest. I watched the Western Suburbs Magpies Intrust Super Premiership team play on the weekend, and they absolutely destroyed Wentworthville. And to have Mahe Fanua and Norfoluma back in reserve grade, I would have either one of those over the top of Zalesniak. So whether there's some hesitation about Norfoluma having to play on the left wing, I'm not too sure, but it's pretty stiff because Zalesniak he come up with a pretty poor attempted catch in some try scoring opportunities last week. So that's where I'm going if I'm the Tigers. If they're any hope, and the maturity of someone like Benji Marshall steering the ship around, they're every chance of that happening. Luke Brooks, he's I think relishing the fact that the spotlight isn't on him. We haven't really heard his name tossed up, even despite their success to start the year. It's been all about Benji. It's been all about Corey Thompson, who signed a new deal that will see him stay at the club in 2019 already. So they're obviously thrilled with. I don't think gamble's the right word, because you've seen the output that he had in the Super League for Widnes, I believe it was 54 tries in 30 odd games. It's doesn't matter if we're talking about a mismatch in ability or standards over there in the Super League. When you're scoring at almost 50% more of a frequency than the games you've played, you can be playing anywhere and playing good footies, and it's evidence that here. Still without. His name's escaped me at the moment. I've had a blank. Elijah Taylor. Still without Elijah Taylor, the Tigers. But I thought Matt Eisenhuth was massive. Scored a try last week. He's developing into a genuine fucking first grader. Love watching him. And I reckon Ivan Cleary will really be getting his men up for this, and they'll be more than confident now. I think that's the best part, is they know that they were down. They were down in that last 10 minutes against the Storm. And, call it what you will, it was that loose offload by Madalino, and Brooks happened to just push up on it and score. Call that luck, call that what you will. But I think that's just tenacity, in my firm opinion. And I really hope that the Tigers can make it a close one again. I think the last, what have we got? 4 games have been single-digit margins. So considering you're thinking of a club in the Melbourne Storm coming out of an era in which we've seen them go to back-to-back grand finals, and the era of wooden spoon victories for the Tigers, that's a pretty healthy record against a club with the expectations of the Storm. So, yeah, that's my key area. I guess a big plus for the Storm. I really like the fact that they've continued to keep Brandon Smith on the bench for themselves. He's just a bulldog. The size that he's added hasn't really done too much in the way of slowing the kid down. And he's just a competitor. And that's exactly some of the values that the Storm love to see in their next crop of talent coming through. So if the Storm are going to bounce back and put some exclamation marks on some of the questions around their performance against the Tigers earlier in the year, it's really got to start with discipline and ball control. It just wasn't there last week, completing at under 70% and giving away 16 odd penalties. It's just not good enough. I think Cameron Smith's he's been penalised 9 times in 4 games, which is only like 3 penalties short of his entire record for last season. So, yeah, look for some improvement there. But I guess if I am backed into a corner, I'd say Storm just don't lose twice. But I was having this conversation with a mate last night, Boise, who's a massive Storm fan. Are we going to start to see a bit of a shift in what we expect? There's expectations have been blown out of the water this first month, so who's to say that the same isn't going to happen? And now we see the Tigers, for the first time in God knows how long, this isn't a stat that I have, but beat the Storm twice in a year. I don't think it's ever been done. Actually, I think I did read that stat. I don't think they've ever beaten them. No, they haven't beaten them twice in a row. They've never beaten the Storm in 2 meetings in a row in their club's history. So I'm guessing that's the West Tigers history. So 99, if my memory serves me correctly. So we're talking almost 2 decades since, and it's never been done. A game that I don't even want to fucking talk about, if I'm being perfectly honest. The Warriors versus the Cowboys. So, the Cowboys in basically the exact same predicament that the Rabbitohs are in against the Dragons. They're a team that are 1 from 4, and they've got to overcome a side who hasn't lost a game. They've got a fucking dreadful record over in New Zealand. They've won 6 out of 19, which is, I guess, akin to their Sydney record up until about 2 or 3 years ago. But the Cowboys have won 4 of the last 5, but more of them have been played in Townsville. So, again, I don't know. I don't know if we're carrying, this is the Cowboys obviously, if we're carrying too many small bodies. They've stuck with Ben Hampton. So, from more reports, Lachlan Coote didn't have the most amazing game in the Intrust Super Cup for Mackay Cutters. So, he's been named at number 19 in the reserve. So, he's definitely not out of it. Javid Bowen holds his place. It looked like his nose was pretty smashed, but maybe it's not as bad as what I anticipated it was, because he's been named in the number 4 jersey, which is handy. We don't need to see a reshuffle. And they're going with Morgan and Thurston in the half still. Granville at 9 and Tamari Martin coming off the bench. Look, there was all this talk around Granville being an 80-minute 9. It hasn't really come to fruition yet. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that is, why it's not really working out. I just dived to a quick question from Dom. All the home crowd will be showing up, so even more pressure on the Cowboys. Yeah, exactly right, Dom. Yeah, and that sort of just echoes, that record that I just said. It doesn't get much more stark than this. So at present, the Cowboys are sitting in the exact same win-loss ratio that saw them win the 2015 title. They were 1 from 4. They were 0-3, so it's a little bit different circumstances. But yeah, you can't really argue with what the Warriors are tossing up at the moment. The changes are positive changes. So return of Sean Johnson, Mason Lenore dropped out, and Simon Mannering has been named on the bench. So how good. So much experience coming back into that lineup, and you're coming up against a team that sucks at playing where you're playing. You've got your home fans with you, and they're without key signing Jordan McLean, who's got a foot injury, and there's so much talk around the layoff period. We're hearing first it was 3 to 4 months, and then it's season. As it stands on the NRL website that's there in front of me at the moment, it still says 3 months, but yeah, I'm not too sure what the ultimate outcome's going to be. So Scott Bolton steps up there, and he'll just do a job exactly like he did coming into the grand final period last season. And Jensen back into the 17. So, he's got a grand final under his belt. You can't say that he's not accustomed to pressure. So this week will ultimately define where the Cowboys are placed. If they don't get a win this week, kiss the top 4 goodbye. Do they have the 17 at their disposal to rally and make the 8? Most definitely. Once this team clicks, they can genuinely beat anyone. But if it doesn't start this week, you're almost kissing top 4 goodbye. You've really got to stay with the pack early on, otherwise you're making it a truly uphill battle. And for the first time this season, I'm actually going to tip against my Cowboys. I think the addition of those players for the Warriors, especially Mannering, someone of his experience, his maturity and leadership, it's only going to add to the likes of Ignatius Parsi and Pulu, not to mention the leaders that are already within that side in Harris and Blair. So, yeah, I like what I'm seeing from the Warriors, and yeah, we're about to see if that change with Lenore having such a good game of bringing Johnson back in is going to be a positive or a negative. Newcastle and the Broncos. There's so many 50-50s. We're over a month into the NRL season, and there's still so many coin tosses. Honestly, my tips are fucked. It's doing my head in. The lowest score that the Knights have kept the Broncos to in the last 5 games is 31 points. So 5 tries is the lowest that they've conceded. And there were a couple of games there where Newcastle even scored 20-odd points. So typically there's been some high-scoring games between these two sides. Another change on the edge, which has me raising my eyebrows. Nathan Ross moved to centre now with the absence of Tautai Moga for the season. So I guess moving Ross to centre just sort of shows that they really were banking on Tautai Moga to be that stand-up again. Exactly like it was to the Broncos. Didn't miss a game for Brisbane last year. And unfortunately, he's gone already. So Nathan Ross moves to the centre with Kensio getting his first cap for the season on the wing. My eyes light up as a Broncos attacking unit because those two men have not defended together in the NRL. So that's where I'm going straight away. And if you don't go there, well, it will be absolute evidence as to the maturity of Anthony Milford and Cody Nikorima as dominant halves for this, famous club in the Brisbane Broncos who have a winning culture despite having not won a premiership in more than a decade. They still have that. It's almost exactly like Redcliffe, to be honest. Redcliffe in the Queensland Cup have not had success for just about the same amount of time, I believe. And, you know, they still have that air of competitiveness every year. Every time you see that you're coming up against them in the draw, it's like, fuck, we've got to bring our best here. So the expectation is still there. And I think that comes, you know, from... They're obviously fairly consistent. They're always in the finals. And it starts there. But, yeah, it's almost the way they carry themselves. But looking at this Bronx lineup, Corey Oates is back in the side with Opacek still named on the bench. My question here is, and I guess I need to unpack this. So Tavita Pangai Jr. is named in the reserves at 19. So is he back? If he is not, and then we look at the forward pack. So Matt Lodge and Corbin Simsey are starting front rows for the Broncos. Neither have performed. Sims was really ordinary last week, as Wayne Bennett came out and said, as was Sam Thaiday. Matt Lodge hasn't really done anything wrong, but hasn't really done anything, if that makes sense. McCulloch has been the mainstay. He's been about the most consistent player for the Broncos so far this season yet again. He got player of the year last year and fucking missed a third of the season. That's how good he was. So yeah, that's who you've got starting up front. And then you've got Thaiday and Offengowie, you know, who's been fairly solid for them, but hasn't set the world on fire, as well as Jaden Sewer and Tom Opacek, as I mentioned. At what point... And Tom Opacek came off the bench and played in the middle last week. And I thought he did a pretty bang-up job. But at what point do we say Jack Bird was already getting tossed around as playing in the middle? At what point do you say, okay, well, Matt Lodge and Corbin Sims, that doesn't sound like the best starting front row I could fucking put together at the Brisbane Broncos. Why don't I just push Josh Maguire up to fucking front row with Matt Lodge and put Jack Bird at lock and let Tom Opacek, the centre, play fucking centre? It's beyond me. I think, in my opinion, it looks pretty obvious. You can argue, oh yeah, but Jack Bird's played centre his whole career. Have you fucking seen his body? He's fucking big. And in my opinion, I think he's carrying more weight than he ever has before in his NRL career. So yeah, and he hasn't been able to get into the game. There's been sparks when the ball has fucking somehow managed to get out to a Broncos edge. But yeah, the more ball that Jack Bird and James Roberts get in their hands, the better. We've seen articles come out today. Does Darius Boyd need to move into the halves? I don't know. I guess he's been their best fucking ball player so far this year. I thought he still played pretty shit, but you know, the times that he did touch the ball against the Dragons in round one were probably some of the best shape that they've played with outside. I guess they did play quite confidently against the Cowboys in that win. But that was when Milford and Nikorima had their running shoes on, and they haven't had it. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd be keen to get, no doubt there's probably going to be more Broncos supporters than any other supporters watching this podcast, just simply because we're in Brisbane broadcasting here. But yeah, I just don't see how Matt Lodge and Corbin Sims, I just don't see the logic behind that when I'm looking at the whole picture of the players that I've got at my disposal. So yeah, real interesting one there. I love the work that Kalen Pong has continued to put in. Brock Lamb, he's going to learn a lot from last week, I think. I think Mitch Pearce, having that experience there, he's going to be able to sit down with Pearcey and have a genuinely honest conversation about what he needs to do in those big games. I think that last 20 minutes, they can really pick apart, hey, this is where you fucking really fell away when we needed you. Because they were in that game against the Dragons, you know. So yeah, I'm really excited. I think that the Knights have the forward pack to stand up to Brisbane, despite the experience on the edges for the Broncos in Glenn and Gillett. You know, exciting players in Fitzgibbon and experience in Guerra. So I think they're evenly matched. Barnett's back into the side. I'm quite confident that the Knights can come and do a job on the Broncos. Unless we see the running game come out of Milford and Nikorima, I just don't see any change. If Tavita Pangai Jr. Perhaps gets named late, we've already seen that he does have the ability to turn a game against probably the best ball runner in our game in Jason Taumalolo. He absolutely diffused that. So he's got that ability there. So if Pangai Jr. does get named, I think that might be a sniff that could just boost that confidence of bodies around that forward pack and give that enthusiasm back to Brisbane. But outside of that, I'm going to go out as it stands from the team that I see in paper. I'm going to tip the Knights. What else have we got here from Dom? We all hope Boyd leaves and Cody off the bench for impact. He's not a starter 80-minute man. Look, I can see where you're coming from, Dom. If by 80-minute man you mean the impact that he can have across 80 minutes, I genuinely I agree with that. He was far better off the bench because the game had started to slow and he's got great feet at the line. Like, we've seen it last week. That right foot step to score untouched. Like, it was one of the softest tries you'll ever see. That was the disappointing thing from the Broncos last week. McCulloch's dummy and go and Nicarima's dummy and go was far too easy. So yeah, as far as Boyd leaving, look, I'm sure there's plenty of Broncos supporters that would agree with you, but I would say the majority would say that you definitely need him. And yeah, it's hard to say. Does a move to the halves, like I just tossed up earlier, is that the answer? The development, the change, the new spark that Darius Boyd needs to I guess, boost him along the end of his career now. Time will tell, but these comparisons made to Lockyer. Lockyer moved to 6 a fucking lot earlier in the career than Darius Boyd, and Darren Lockyer never fucking played on the wing. So I'll just leave with that. But yeah, tipping the Knights. Alrighty, we're nearly there, gang. Gold Coast Titans versus Manly Sea Eagles at Marley Brown Oval. I believe that is in Gladstone because the Titans are still on the road. They don't get back to Gold Coast until round 8 after the Com Games that have started today up here in southeast Queensland. The Titans are unchanged, which is quite obvious to be perfectly honest. They've beaten the Broncos. The big brother little brother battle is over. But the big plus, there's pros and cons for this Manly lineup. Dylan Walker's been named to return in the centres, which sees Matt Wright get pushed to fullback for the injured Tom Trbojevic, although Trbojevic has been named in the reserves list. So perhaps it's maybe 50-50. He was initially ruled out for 2 weeks, but maybe, it's come good and he might be a late inclusion. I would like to think he's probably going to miss this week, and it's just to sort of keep the Titans on their toes, and perhaps, if he's been named this week, maybe he's going to be back next week and just miss that 1 week just as a precaution, especially because it is a niggling thing, like he has injured that one before. So yeah, the back five, Matthew Wright, Brad Parker, Dylan Walker, Brian Kelly, Akili Uate. Look, it's definitely not their ideal starting back five. Not having Trbojevic there, George Tafua gone with that broken collarbone already. So you've got a lot of inexperience in Brian Kelly and Brad Parker there, as well as Lachlan Croker, who still holds on to 6. There's a lot of chatter going around that he may be dropped and Jackson Hastings comes into the fray there at 6. But the forward pack for Manly, Fanua Blake is in a great run of form. Marty Tapau hasn't really set the world on fire, but at the same time, he hasn't had like the peaks and troughs like he had at times last year. I think he's been a lot more consistent. Joel Thompson, I thought, had his best game for the club so far this year, and Frank Winterstein comes back now that Sirinen has been ruled out with that ACL for the whole year. So Winterstein gets his chance, and you would think that he'll probably end up staying there. So one of the older, I think he was one of the oldest debutants in NRL history. I believe he was 30 odd. So did a really good job. I love Sean Lane and Lloyd Parrott coming off the bench. For me, even though that we're seeing sort of this up and down performance from the Sea Eagles, and it was very much influenced by Tom Trbojevic, I think they can keep on their winning ways simply because of Cherry Evans' kicking game and Api Coruscant's running game, and just his game awareness is really, really sharp. It's really entertaining to watch. And to echo off the back of the Titans' victory, I think it was a lot more really to do with the Broncos' fucking poor start and terrible discipline from there on and out that saw them get home, especially, the 2 tries that they did let in were really, really weak. It's great, nonetheless, great to see them get a win, but I think they're just going to struggle for that week in, week out consistency. So based off the back of that, I'm tipping a Sea Eagles victory, so I won't really dwell too much more on that. In the final game, another repeat of round 1. So 2 games this round that we've seen in round 1. Parramatta versus Penrith. Another team that's in dire straits. Parramatta 0-5. What do you do? They've stuck with Kaiser Pritchard at 9, who was nowhere near as impressive as I expected him to be. hard to do when you're playing behind a pack that's not really doing much and getting moved around and really found out as far as fitness was concerned. They just got gassed. Yeah, relying far too much on Nathan Brown. The amount of work that poor fucker gets through without much reward. Another really subpar performance from Kenny Edwards. And just defensively on the edges, Mitchell Moses did all that hard work. I felt last season to get himself, well, once he moved from the Tigers, that was the biggest question mark next to his name, and I thought he did really well to improve on that, but then it sort of just fell apart. And then how do you go past this Penrith forward pack? They're going to be brimming with confidence after beating a full-strength Cowboys side. How does it take a backward step? Campbell, Gillard and Merrin getting back to the form that we know he's capable of. Peter Wallace, he's really reinvented himself at 9 now. Viliami Kickout, get him one-on-one with any of those halves. Like we thought Mitch Moses and defended poorly last week. Well, good luck if Kickout or Isaiah Yeo get a hold of you. I think Isaiah Yeo will be the back row that he's defending against. So, yeah. I can't see Parramatta bouncing back from this either. So I think we're going to see Parramatta and the Raiders still winless after this week. I think it might seem like a minute factor, but playing at ANZ, put him at fucking Pertex Stadium and let the faithful come down and give them the fucking rev up the arse that they so desire. It's so hard to get any sort of vibe and atmosphere when you're playing at ANZ Stadium in front of fucking no one, essentially. But yeah, the only stat I've really got, past 6 matches, 10 points or less. I think this is going to be anything but. This could be a real bloodbath if Penrith are just patient. We've seen how quickly they blew that scoreboard out with James Maloney at the helm. They're definitely not losing anything with Tyrone Peachey. If anything, like he just adds that dynamic around the ruck of running. And he's got that amazing fend. He's got great feet, great support play, as is Maloney. I don't think there's too many better than Maloney at supporting. So, I just, some of the youngsters there, Christian Crichton stood up. Fisher Harris is really coming to be the player that they all knew that he was going to be. Wade Egan keeps his spot on the bench. So, it just shows the wealth of talent coming through in the junior system for Penrith with the likes of Sione Katoa, who played phenomenally well last year when he got his opportunities at 9. He's just in the reserves. So, Wade Egan's all of a sudden jumped him. Jerome Luai is always in the mix there. So, it's great to see this competitive nature in key positions too, to have those players developing. So, phenomenal. If I'm Penrith, I'm just attacking those edges. Anytime we can get one-on-one with Norman or Moses, that's a good day out. Will Smith, he's quite a meek body at the back. I think they'll look to bomb him again, just like the Tigers did with great success, and really look to land him. So, yeah, they'll be looking to get under the skin. Peter Wallace is an expert at fucking getting to the kicker in defence. So, he'll definitely look to rattle up Mitchell Moses early on and pretty much, I guess, figure out where they went wrong in that first 10-15 minutes of round 1 and ensure that, that 10-point victory turns into 20-30. And I definitely think they're capable of it. So that just about does us. Again, I think, what are we at? About 50 minutes I've fucking spoke to myself for, so I'm sure I've bored you all enough. Again, share this with all your mates. Leave comments, any questions that you want, just leave them on the page for me. I'll look to get to them. But yeah, I should definitely have Cutho back for the review. We'll try and bang one out Sunday night while it's still nice and fresh, with this last game being at, what we got, 4:10 Queensland time. So yeah, enjoy all your footy. By all means, let me know who your tips are. Do you agree, disagree with what I've tossed up? Let's just get the conversation going. This is footy fans talking to footy fans. I'm a nufty as far as the rugby league world is concerned, and I just love talking about the game that I'm sure if you're watching this, love dearly as well. So until the weekend, enjoy your footy. I'm Benny Matthews. It's been Footy Rants. Catch you, gang.